What if the thing that makes you feel broken is actually proof you're brilliant? Most people spend their entire lives trying to fit in, trying to think faster, talk smoother, feel less. But what if everything you've been told about intelligence is wrong? What if the real signs of a superior mind look nothing like a perfect report card or a high SAT score? Here's what nobody tells you. The most intelligent people on Earth are usually the ones who feel the most out of place. And by the end of this, you're going to understand exactly why, and it's going to change how you see yourself forever. But first, we need to talk about a lie you've been told your whole life.
For decades, intelligence was measured in one way, a number, your IQ. Sit down, fill in the bubbles, and society tells you exactly how smart you are. Schools built entire systems around it. Companies hired based on it. Parents bragged about it at dinner parties. But here's the problem. That number captures maybe 15% of what actual human intelligence looks like. The rest? It's invisible. It doesn't show up on tests. It doesn't get you gold stars in class. In fact, sometimes it gets you sent to the principal's office. The psychologist Howard Gardner spent decades arguing that intelligence isn't a single thing. It's a spectrum, a constellation. And the most dangerous kind of intelligence, the kind that actually changes the world, almost never looks impressive at first glance. So, let's go through the 9 signs, and I want you to pay close attention because sign number 7 is going to make you seriously uncomfortable. Sign 1, you talk to yourself, and you don't think that's weird. Not out loud at a bus stop necessarily, but in your head, constantly, you're narrating, analyzing, running simulations. You replay conversations. You rehearse arguments you'll never have. You explain things to an imaginary version of someone who doesn't understand yet. Psychologists call this inner speech, and research from the University of Nevada found that people with a rich, complex inner monologue have significantly higher problem-solving ability. Why? Because you're essentially using language as a tool to think, not just to communicate. You're running your brain like a private laboratory. Most people experience the world directly. You experience the world and then immediately build a second version of it in your mind to examine from every angle. Now think about this. Every major scientific breakthrough in history came from someone who couldn't stop having conversations with themselves. Einstein called his thought experiments plays of the imagination. He would mentally ride alongside a beam of light. He would imagine clocks on moving trains. He didn't discover relativity in a laboratory. He discovered it in his own mind, talking to himself. If people have ever told you that you overthink things, congratulations, you're doing exactly what the greatest minds in history did.
Sign 2. You feel deeply uncomfortable with things you can't explain. Stupid people are rarely confused. Think about that for a second. Confusion requires awareness of complexity. You can only feel confused about something if you understand enough to know that you don't fully understand it. Most people walk through the world in a fog of confident ignorance. They see something they don't understand and their brain just moves on, files it away, doesn't lose sleep. But you? Something doesn't add up and it eats at you. You can't let it go. You're lying in bed at 3 in the morning, turning a question over and over like a stone you're convinced has something underneath it. The philosopher Bertrand Russell said that the whole problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves, while wiser people are so full of doubts. That restlessness, that constant sense that you haven't quite gotten to the bottom of something, that's not a weakness. That is your intelligence refusing to accept a shortcut. But here's the scary part. This same trait is also what makes highly intelligent people more prone to anxiety. Because a brain that cannot stop searching for patterns and explanations is a brain that is always working, always scanning, never fully at rest. You don't just have a busy mind, you have a mind that refuses to clock out. Sign 3. You are a late bloomer, or you still feel like one. There's a concept in developmental psychology called asynchronous development. It means that in gifted individuals, different parts of the brain develop at wildly different rates. Your intellectual capacity races ahead of your emotional maturity, your social skills, your sense of identity. The result is a person who feels perpetually out of sync with everyone around them. You're 12, but you're reading books meant for adults. You're 25, but you feel like you still haven't figured out what everyone else seems to have figured out at 18. You're 30, and you still feel like you're waiting for your real life to begin. The research on this is striking. Studies on exceptionally intelligent adults consistently find that they report feeling younger than their chronological age, not because they're immature, because their sense of possibility hasn't collapsed the way it does for most people. Most people stop genuinely wondering about their own future somewhere in their mid-20s. Highly intelligent people never really stop. What if I told you that feeling behind is actually evidence that you're further ahead than you realize?
Sign 4. You find it almost impossible to respect authority for its own sake. Not because you're rebellious, not because you have an attitude problem, but because your brain is wired to evaluate ideas on their merit, not their source. When someone tells you that's just the way it's done, something in you short-circuits. You need the reason, you need the logic, you need to understand why before you can accept it. And when no good reason exists, when the answer is simply tradition or hierarchy or because I said so, you feel a kind of quiet intellectual revolt. History is absolutely full of this. Galileo didn't have an authority problem, he had a truth problem. He couldn't look away from what the telescope was showing him, even when every institution around him was telling him not to. Nikola Tesla infuriated Edison not because he was difficult, but because he kept seeing better ways to do things that Edison had already decided were finished. The most intelligent people are almost always the worst employees in bureaucratic systems, not because they can't work hard, because they can't pretend that a bad idea is a good one just because someone with a title said it. This gets them fired. It also gets them remembered. Sign 5. You have a strange relationship with time. You lose hours to things that fascinate you. An interesting idea grabs hold and suddenly it's 2 a.m. and you've read 14 articles, watched 3 documentaries, and filled up 3 pages of notes on something you didn't even know existed this morning. Psychologists call this a state of flow, the complete absorption of conscious attention into a single activity. And research by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the psychologist who spent his career studying this state, found that the capacity to enter flow deeply and reliably is one of the strongest predictors of both creative output and overall life satisfaction. But here's what's interesting. Flow isn't equally available to everyone. It requires a very specific balance. The challenge of the task has to perfectly match your skill level. Too easy and you get bored. Too hard and you get anxious. The fact that you regularly find things that pull you into that perfect zone means your mind is operating at a level where genuine complexity becomes pleasurable rather than threatening. Most people avoid complexity. You're drawn to it like a current. But there's a darker side to this. The same capacity for deep focus means that when you're bored, truly deeply bored, it becomes almost unbearable. You don't experience mild boredom, you experience something closer to suffocation. Meetings that could have been emails, conversations stuck on the surface of things, small talk that goes nowhere. Your mind was built for deep water. Shallow water feels like a cage.
Sign 6. You have more questions after getting an answer than you did before. Most people ask a question because they want the question to go away. You ask a question and the answer opens 10 more doors and you want to open every single one of them. This is called intellectual curiosity, but that phrase doesn't quite capture how aggressive it actually feels inside a genuinely curious mind. It's not passive wonder, it's an almost physical compulsion. You cannot hear an interesting fact without immediately needing to know what's underneath it, what caused it, what it connects to, what it means. Darwin spent 5 years on the beagle, but the real work happened in the 20 years after he got home. 20 years of relentless questioning, every answer creating new problems, Every species he examined raising new questions about every other species. His notebooks from that period read like a man who is constantly slightly overwhelmed by the size of what he's trying to understand. The uncomfortable truth is that intelligence doesn't make the world simpler, it makes it more complex. Every layer you peel back reveals a deeper layer, and the most intelligent people are the ones who find that deepening complexity thrilling rather than exhausting. You don't want answers, you want better questions, and that distinction matters more than almost anything else on this list. Sign 7. You feel things more intensely than the people around you. I told you this one would be uncomfortable. There's a concept developed by Polish psychologist Kazimierz Dabrowski called overexcitability. He spent decades studying gifted individuals and found that they don't just think differently, they feel differently, more intensely, more physically, more overwhelmingly. Music hits you in a way that feels almost personal. A piece of art can stop you completely. Injustice doesn't just frustrate you, it genuinely disturbs you in a way that lingers for days. You feel other people's pain as if it has mass, as if it lands on you rather than near you. And the world has spent a lot of time telling you that this is a problem. Too sensitive, too emotional, too much. But Dabrowski's research found something remarkable. This emotional intensity in gifted individuals isn't separate from their intelligence, it's part of it. The same neural architecture that lets them process information more deeply also processes emotional information more deeply. You can't have one without the other. The people who changed history were almost never the coolest people in the room. They were the ones who cared too much, who felt things they couldn't explain, who were moved by ideas and broken by cruelty in ways that the people around them simply weren't. Your sensitivity isn't your weakness, it's the engine underneath everything else.
Sign 8. You constantly play devil's advocate, even against your own positions. You've probably been in an argument where you were winning, clearly winning, and then your own brain quietly produced the best counterargument to your position, and you had to decide in real time whether to pretend you didn't just think of it. This is called steel manning, building the strongest possible version of the opposing view rather than the weakest. And research on argumentation and critical thinking consistently finds that it's one of the rarest and most powerful cognitive skills a person can develop. Most people argue to win. They look for the weakest point in the other person's position and attack it. It feels good. It's also how you end up completely wrong while feeling completely right. Highly intelligent people argue to understand. They look for the strongest version of every position, including the ones they disagree with, because they know that reality doesn't care about their preferences. Charles Darwin famously kept a special notebook that he called his Devil's Advocate notebook. Every time he found evidence that contradicted his own theory of evolution, he wrote it down immediately, because he knew his brain would forget inconvenient information if he didn't force himself to record it. He didn't just tolerate the evidence against him, he hunted for it. Now think about this. How many people do you know who actively look for reasons they might be wrong? That instinct, that willingness to undermine their own certainty is extraordinarily rare, and it is the foundation of every genuine scientific and philosophical breakthrough in human history. Sign 9. You've always felt slightly alien, like you're watching the world from just outside it.
Not in a dramatic way, not in a way you'd necessarily admit to people, but there's always been a thin pane of glass between you and full immersion in the social world. Like you're observing slightly more than you're participating. Like part of your mind is always taking notes. Psychologists describe this as metacognition, thinking about thinking, the ability to step outside your own mental processes and observe them in real time. It's considered one of the highest order cognitive abilities a human being can develop, and it has a strange side effect. It makes you feel like an outsider, because you're always operating on two levels simultaneously, the level where you're living the experience and the level where you're watching yourself live it. Writers describe this constantly. Joan Didion said she kept a notebook because she needed to know what it was like to be herself. Kafka described feeling like he was on the outside of life, looking in through a window. Orwell wrote about a constant sense of watching, cataloging, filing. This is the sign most likely to make intelligent people feel fundamentally lonely. Because when you're always the observer, full belonging feels perpetually one step away. You're at the party, but you're also watching the party. You're in the conversation, but part of you is listening to the conversation as if it's a recording. And here is the final twist I promised you. That feeling of alienation, of being slightly outside of things, of watching while others simply live, it isn't isolation, it's perspective. Every person on this list throughout history, Darwin, Tesla, Einstein, Didion, Kafka, all of them felt exactly what you feel. Out of place, too much, too sensitive, too questioning, too restless to just accept the world as it was handed to them. And that slight distance from the world, that feeling of watching through glass, that is precisely where ideas come from. You cannot see the shape of something when you're standing inside it. The people who changed how we understand reality were the ones who couldn't fully disappear into it. But here's the part that should stay with you. Intelligence doesn't guarantee happiness. It doesn't guarantee success. In fact, most of the traits on this list will cause you significant pain at some point in your life. The overthinking, the sensitivity, the inability to let things go, the restlessness that never fully quiets. The question isn't whether you're intelligent. The question is what you do with a mind like this. Because a mind that asks better questions, that feels more deeply, that refuses to accept easy answers, that mind is either going to drive you slowly insane, or it's going to build something that outlasts you. There is no middle option. And the fact that you're still watching, still thinking, still turning this over right now, that might just be your answer.